Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I've decided tonight to speak about the Bodhisattva vow as it has been expressed by Sokuzan. And he shared that this is how he received this vow. The language that was used was be with all things. And I think this is a familiar phrase that we have heard from our teacher. And it is, for me, it feels like the ground of this practice. Be with all things it's the last of the 3 pure precepts that are received when one receives Jukai, or when one is ordained fully. And the 3 pure precepts, very simply, are do good, don't do harm, and do good for others, or save all beings, or be with all things. And I think that the vow to be with all things is vast and deep and brings up many questions for me as to what that is pointing at. What is it to be with? What is it to be with anything really? And what are all things? Especially in the context of mind only or perception only, if what we are seeing, if whatever shows up in front of us, if that is our mind, if that is purely a creation, a million causes and conditions coming together for the appearance of something, what is it to be with that which is showing up? So the invitation to be with all things, I think, keeps bringing us back to the practice. And Shikantaza, it seems that Shikantaza, the practice that we are taught here, that we spend so many hours doing, the practice of holding the body still and observing whatever shows up in the mind, in the body, seemingly in our environment, whatever shows up there, we just observe and endeavor to not push on it, not pull, not shut down, to simply not interfere with what is showing up. And I do wonder if that in itself is being with all things, if we're seeing that we already are with all things, if that might just be the case fundamentally. But the practice is there so that we can see the ways in which we shut down on what's already the case. In looking at this vow, I was contemplating what a vow is. And it seems, well, I found a note from a talk a long time ago by Sokuzan, and Sokuzan said that a vow is not something that we do, it's something that we are. It's no more clear to me now than it was, but it's interesting to look at. If we are a vow, what is happening when we receive a vow and intend to align with a vow? Hmm. So being with all things, it seems like an invitation to live our lives exactly as our lives are showing up and exactly as we are. And Sokuzan many, many times has encouraged us to live our lives and don't miss your life. Being with all things. It's something that shows up in my daily life as a therapist. And the way in which it has been showing up for me is sitting in front of someone or interacting with a Sangha member or parenting my son. And right now, the way that this vow is showing up is getting the sense of not knowing, really sitting in not knowing what is showing up in front of me and having lots of commentary about what is showing up in front of me. So lots of preferences, lots of judgments, lots of ideas and stories, and not knowing what this actually is in front of me. So that's brought up another layer of curiosity. It being with all things is it not knowing? So again, another teaching that is encouraged or pointed at is we can't know exactly what something is. We can relatively know, but we can't ultimately know what we're looking at. I would really appreciate questions to help me work with this or to elaborate. Mioka.
Milka bowing. What is it when we're in our body and it looks like we're a body here sitting in front of each other? What is it to not know that physically bowing?
Will you ask that question once more, please?
Milka bowing. When we're sitting in front of somebody and it looks like bodies and we feel like we're in the space with somebody, what is it to not know in that situation? Bowing.
I think that it might not look much different than having a sense of knowing, because there can be familiarity with your own form, with the form in front of you, with storylines and dynamics, all of that can be there. And there's something else there that I don't think is a thing. that loosens up our sense of knowing, or makes porous something that appears very solid. Without that apparent solidity going away. Is there more?
Not yet.
Shanjian.
John Jan Valley. For the vow to be with all things and save all beings as equivalents, how do you see those two being equivalents or not? For me, it's a bit confusing, the juxtaposition between the two.
Thank you for the question, but I find it to be confusing too, and I have a preference for be with all things. Save all beings feels loaded with ideas. About saving, or what does that mean? All that comes to mind with save all beings is to be at the service of whatever looks like other. And that seems to be more in line with be with all things.
Shanjian Bowing, if service seems a bit more active to me, do you feel there's a distinction there between service and just being?
The language does suggest more action. Maybe something that resonates more is receive.
Shanjian Bowing, it feels, for me too, it feels like be with all things resonates more, and I don't know if that's directly from Sokusan's own teachings, or that's where it originates from. But I guess I'm wondering how that. I'm losing it. What is it about being with all things that resonates more with you than saving all beings?
I think it's the way that it strikes me, which is limitless and deep, and to be with all things. There's no limit to that, and it doesn't seem like anything easily prescribed. What does that mean? So that vastness appeals to me.
A little louder, please.
When you're
When you're bowing, I think you said earlier, whatever shows up in front of us is a creation of our mind. Are you saying then that we're creating other bowing?
I do. It does seem that we are creating other, not purposefully or consciously. We're conditioned to be a solid, and to believe that we are a solid being who is born and will die and has a complex life story, and we need to be kept safe, and we need to achieve things. And that alone creates other, then we have this whole world to interact with and get our way in. Or be of service in. So not a conscious creation, but still a creation.
Are you bowing? So when you say I know you're a therapist, so when you're meeting with a client, when they show up either maybe on Zoom or in your presence, what do you see? Bowing.
I see, I couldn't say one thing, but I see, I see someone who I care a lot about. I see their characteristics, I see their body language, I see the couch that they're sitting on, and I feel a lot. It's a really full experience. And I feel like I'm at a loss with people. That's the feeling, even if things come up and work is done or listening is happening or Thank you for that question.
When you're bowing, so if you're working with someone you've worked with a number of times, so you have some familiarity, do you, I guess I'm going back to the Bodhisattva vow, be with all things. You said this is the ground of this practice. So in your therapy practice, how do you not have your preconceptions foremost when you're especially working with someone you know? Or do you? Maybe you do. Maybe your preconceptions lead the way. How is that being with all things, bowing?
There certainly are preconceptions. And I don't think that being with all things needs to be free of preconceptions because that's something else to be with. I think that the being with is not just being with an apparent other, but being with what's happening here as well. So being with the preconception, being with the judgment, being with the confusion or anger or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Ondo.
On the bowing. The first grave precept, not killing life, and the way Sokuzan has it, there's only one life that is unkillable. And not to interrupt the mandala of the present moment is no killing life. It seems so similar to be with all things to me. How do you see the similarities and how do you see the differences between the pure precept and the first grave precept, bowing?
I think that's a good question. And I think I would need a pen and paper to suss that out. I don't have the mental power to do that in this moment. But I do think that this vow encompasses all the precepts. It seems to be reflected in each of them.
I have a whole nother question. I had many questions, but the next one is, you said you brought up Sokuzan saying, don't miss your life. And with that, be with all things. how are you seeing don't miss your life tie into be with all things? Can I give you some paper?
I think I can respond to that. I think that being with all things is not missing your life. If if you're endeavoring to be with the emotion that's coming up, if you're endeavoring to be with the disliking of this and the loving of that and the joy of something, or the whatever, quite literally, whatever it is, that's your life. So it seems to be completely entwined with living a life.
Devon, does that include missing your life? Probably.
Yes. But if you're with missing your life, are you missing it? I don't know. No.
When you're bowing, how is not knowing confusion, Molly?
Not knowing is confusion if it feels like you should know.
Is that wisdom then, Molly?
Probably. I don't know that intimately. I don't know that for myself. But the way it's looking right now is that there's a not knowing that can just feel like a problem, the relative not knowing when you should have an answer. Or you should have things together, you should have a plan. And then the willingness to not know seems to be, if that's an attitude that is, if you've oriented yourself in that way, or where you're endeavoring to have a willingness to not know, that seems to be a step in the direction of the not knowing that is wisdom.
When you're bowing, a few minutes ago, in response to one of my questions, you said sometimes when you're with a client, or I put it in that picture, but it doesn't have to be there. I think one of the last things you said was you feel at a loss. Is there, can you characterize what that feeling feels like? That sort of lost feeling? And does it hinder or help, if either, for you to be with all things, bowing?
It has helped in the past. It's not a new feeling, the feeling of being at a loss isn't new. It used to feel terrifying to me that I really should know what I'm doing in here, and do I have any business doing this with another person? And there somewhere, I don't know when, there was a shift where being at a loss almost was, well, painful, or it just feels like complete space for anything to show up. And creativity is the word that shows up mostly, that there's just this mutuality that's creative and moving and can look vastly different with each person and day to day.
Yvonne, thank you. Would you say in those times then that you give up any expectations you might have of outcomes, bowing?
I don't know because it doesn't feel like there's any giving up happening in this scenario. So I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Views on,
Use unbound. What does it mean when you say that we are the vow?
I'm not sure. Oh my gosh, I just had that written down from Sokuzan. A vow is not something you do, it's something you are. It suggests be with all things. When I contemplate that I am with all things, or I am all things. I don't know.
Use unbound. Is there also a doing quality of the vow?
Shikantaza meditation is the doing. Or observing could be the doing. Observing, fighting with stuff, observing. Holding things close, observing, just not seeing, ignoring. I think that's the doing.
Use unbound. What shows up for me when I hear be with all things, I want to do something, and what shows up is like take a quarter of an inch step back. I wonder if is that what the vow is pointing at?
I think so. At least a piece of it.
Have there been any blind alleys that you've gone down with trying to be with all things? No.
I don't know. Probably. But an example is not showing up. Thank you. Yoga.
Yoga bowing, when you're working with someone and they want you to know, or they want you to have answers or to help them, what is the willingness to not know and be with all things? Bowing.
What's coming to mind right away is the idea that we've heard of holding our seat. We're just not scrambling to fabricate an answer or pull something together quickly out of fear. I know that's an experience I've had doing that, scrambling and coming up with something not helpful.
Yoga bowing, what do you mean by scrambling? And I'm thinking in particular about how that might show up with the three poisons bowing.
I've forgotten what exactly we're talking about.
Yoga bowing, if you're scrambling to pull something together to maybe respond to a client or some situation, what is that how would you describe that scrambling in terms of the three poisons, Molly?
I'm not sure, I would have to make something up at this point to respond to that, because I don't, that scrambling hasn't. I don't know. Maybe if the question could be asked differently, I could have a response. I'm not sure.
Um, hmm. Yeah, if you're Yokobowing, if you're putting things together, are you kind of filling a space like passion, or do you feel like you're ignoring something? Or do you feel like it's a combination of all those, or yeah, is there anything that shows up?
Okay, thank you. I think probably all of them, finding a position, taking it. And I think in taking a position, the three poisons are usually involved. Does that respond to your question?
Yokobowing, yes, thank you.
Are there any questions online? Tishin,
Bowing. If there is no self and no others, what are we with? Bowing.
as far as practice goes and being embodied in this world, we are with all of the stuff of the world, everything that shows up. Our partners, our friends, our animals, our thoughts, our loves, our I think just everything that appears, that's what we're with.
Thank you.
Thank you. When
You're bowing. Earlier, you said something about don't interfere with whatever shows up. Do we have any control about whether we interfere or not, bowing?
I don't think we do. That idea of not interfering, I think, is practice, because we might interfere or we might need to interfere, and how do we ever know?
You're bowing. Along those lines, then sometimes Sokathan teaches us about outflows. Are there times when outflows are have a negative aspect to them and tend to interfere with what's showing up? And if so, is there a way to intercede on that, bowing?
Will you ask that question once more, please?
You mind? I think what I'm trying to get at is there's also a teaching he gives us from his teacher, be genuine. Are we being genuine if we interfere with what shows up, bowing?
Yes. I think being genuine can look any way imaginable, even when practicing and endeavoring to not outflow or to not do harm or to not interfere. There's just there's no formula, there's no I think sometimes we just. Sometimes a mess can be made and that's not a problem.
You bowing, do you have example of that for us? Can't imagine you making a mess.
Hmm. I know I have examples. And I'm sorry I don't have one to deliver.
Thank you.
Choose on.
Use and bowing. What's important about bowing to do something that we can't do?
I think the close looking that happens when we're vowing to align with something. And that vow, including mind training, a practice that turns us here. So we can see the way that we're trying to do something. We're trying to align with this teaching and seeing the way that we can't quite do it. It's funny, as I'm describing this, I can't think of what's helpful about that, but I know it is. What is helpful about that? Is there more to that question?
I think so, but I don't have it yet.
Yoga.
Yoga bowing. Sokuzan got asked this question earlier, but what is you said close looking, but I think his question was, or someone, maybe Jishin or somebody asked him, what is looking closely? What does it mean to look closely at something? Bowing.
I think that it's looking with the inspiration or the intention um, to be with it, to really feel something or see something, or to look into the dark and not know what it is that we're looking at. I think that can be very close, looking closely.
Yoga bowing. Are you aware when you're working with a client of having them look at that darkness in some way? Bowing?
I try to encourage that every chance I get to look.
Louder, please.
Thank you. I encourage people to look at the unknown, or look in the direction of what is present.
Thank you.
Shunji and bowing. I think Unyo was going in this direction with one of her questions earlier, but what are some of the, if you can find them, what are some of the outer limits of being with all things that you've explored, or some of the nooks and crannies of, or detailed stuff that you've explored with being with all things?
I don't think I have an answer to that question because it's a pretty loose situation for me.
Okay.
It feels so, it's not simple, but it feels like heartbreakingly simple.
When you're bowing, what's heartbreaking about simple bowing?
Mm. I think what be with all things, what that's pointing at. I think that's what is so simple. That we are already with, we're completely intimately involved with the entire world. And that is refused. We refuse it, outright refusing it, or we grab hold of it. And I think that is almost a refusal in itself. Or I don't have a good answer.
And the heartbreak is,
I don't know, I just feel it. Is there a final question? Thank you.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho Sanchi Ishifu Shi Song Bu Sha Mo Sha Moko Hoja Horomi. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.